it's me again. As I said somewhere in a previous video that I'm certainly going to upload before this one, I finished my novel. Woo! Which also means I am now suffering in the depths of the query trenches, and probably before this video I also uploaded that video about query trenches and how horrid it is. So we're not going to talk about that in this video. We're going to talk about The Name of the Wind. I really liked this book. Disclaimer, spoiler. Like I said somewhere in one of those two videos about finishing my book and querying, I want to read more before I start writing again. Partially because I'm feeling pretty shitty about myself in the query trenches, which I'm hoping it's not a permanent thing. If I get any requests for fulls, if you're watching agents and you are interested in a disabled heroine, please hit me up. Please. So if I get any requests for fulls, I'll probably feel way less shit about myself until people pass on my fulls and then they tell me like my book fucking sucks. So until then, we're gonna read and hopefully make myself not only a less shitty writer, but less miserable about real life because I'm not in real life. This is very hard to show the name of on camera because it's like reflective. Name of the Wind, great book, loved it. Great, so as you know, I don't typically review books on my channel, but I'm tired of getting writing advice videos because I'm not published, I have no credentials, so we're gonna do other bookish things on this channel instead, and you can all suffer through that. I obviously can't make any writing vlog videos because I'm not writing right now because I'm suffering instead, so we're talking about books. And I don't know what I'm doing. We're gonna start off with the negatives, and then the neutrals, and then end on the positives because I really like this book. And I want you to leave with a good impression of it, but it wasn't perfect, okay? This wasn't written by Brandon Sanderson, okay? Patrick Rothfuss, I think this is probably gonna be backwards, but Patrick, you're not Brandon. You're great. You did a great job on this book. I've heard mixed things about Wise Man's Fear. It's been a very long time since you published the second one. We're all waiting for the third. I'm going to read Wise Man's Fear soon, but you're not Brandon. And he's the only one who can publish a perfect book, so it's fine. So we're gonna start off with the negatives. One, I personally think it has it's a chunky book, okay? This is like the mass market paperback, and it's like Chunker City, and the like regular size paperback, which I bought this secondhand, which is why I got the mass market. I usually do not buy mass markets because I just don't like how small they are, especially when the book is so chunky. But again, bought it secondhand. It's chunky, and it was a slow start, in my opinion. It takes quite a while for us to get to. Let's talk about what this book is about. Again, I've never reviewed a book on my channel, so I don't know what I'm doing. It's a story following Kavoth? I don't know how you're supposed to say his name. Here's how you spell it. It's a story of Kavoth telling his life, so it's technically a story within a story. And it's his life part is the part that is actually, in my opinion, interesting. And in the beginning, you're like, Kavoth is like a bartender in a small town village thing. And you know from the backstory, like the back. And I also know, because I had watched other people talk about this book, like spoiler-free reviews before I read it, that the book is about he's telling the story of his life, and the part before that, in my opinion, is very slow, and I don't care. And then, when we get to Kavoth's life, I also thought it was quite slow, even after he met Abernethy, Ben. This is hopefully going to be spoiler-free, and if I think in editing that there's a spoiler, I will put a spoiler tag on the screen. So anyway, when he meets Ben, that's when a lot of people seem to think this book picks up, but I really think it picks up after. With that one big event that colors Kavoth's life for the rest of it. If you've read it, you know what I'm talking about. But I think my favorite parts are when he's at school. And that takes kind of a bit of time to get to. Oh, I still have a bookmark in here. Yeah, it takes kind of a bit of time to get to the school, which was my favorite part. Also, you are just thrown in. I feel like especially the part that's setting up him telling the story. Like, there is so little context for what is happening. It's obviously intentional because the bigger overarching story is about how Kavoth got to be a bartender. Like, it's obvious that's kind of what the story is building up to in the third book, is how he got where he is today. But it is kind of like, that is like, not everybody is going to like hitting the ground running in the middle of this dude's life and not really understanding a lot of what he is insinuating with his like mentee or whatever, and feeling very confused and lost for most of the beginning of the book. I didn't mind it because it tends to be what Brandon does with his prologue, like Brandon Sanderson does with his prologues. So I don't mind it. And it is kind of like a fantasy tropey thing, but not everybody's going to like that. So like, go in knowing that like you're gonna be kind of lost in a sea of Kavoth's life for at least like, I don't know, in this edition at least 100 pages. That is a negative. Hard negative. I hate Kavoth's love interest so much. I think she is a bit of a manic pixie dream girl, without saying anything else about who it is or why or anything. I just think that Rothfuss did not do a great job writing her, to be honest. And I don't think it's because Kavoth is the narrator. I truly just think she's a poorly written female character. And although I appreciate like Rothfuss doesn't dwell on like a woman's physical appearance in a way a lot of bad male fantasy writers do, I do not like her. I think she's a poorly written female character and is like the epitome of like the type of female love interest to a male main character I cannot stand. And so it was really difficult at points to get through the sections that had her in it because I just rolled my eyes and like wanted to skip forward, and it sucked because one of my favorite scenes near the end of the book, like she's a big part of it, but I love what Kavoth was doing. It was quite difficult to balance those emotions, but anyway. And my fourth and final negative is like tied to that, is that I do think, regardless of it being Rothfuss's authorial choice, I also think Kavoth is completely unreliable when it comes to relaying details about his love interest. There are arguments on either side of whether or not Kavoth is a reliable narrator. I am kind of on the fence. I think for parts of it he is quite reliable, but I think other parts there are times in which he is completely unreliable, especially in regards to his love interest. He is too infatuated with her. And so we get a super like rose-tinted view of her, and I think it's Rothfuss's way of trying to make a bad female character not suck so much, and I think it doesn't work. I think I hate her anyway, and I just see it as trying to, it's just trying to mask the fact that she is like, she doesn't feel like a character all her own. She just feels like this dream girl, and Kavoth's narrating of her is just unbelievably annoying. Everything about that female character just drives me up a wall in this book. I almost gave this book like a 4 stars or a 3.5 just for her, and then I stepped back and was like, but the rest of the book was really good. So I gave it 5 stars, but oh my god, she was just unbearable. On to the neutrals. Kavoth is probably the most overpowered main character I have read from in a very long time. He is good at everything, and everything seems to go his way in the end. There are some times in which I think like that would not work out that well for any other person, like any real person, but because he's the main character, it works out for him. It just feels sometimes that there are conveniences that bug me, but this is only a neutral because I do sometimes really like reading about a super strong character, because at times like you get really hyped up, like, yeah, like beat him up, like do it, like put the antagonist in their place, like, whoa. especially if I think they have a likable personality, and in my opinion, like Kavoth does have a super likable personality. And so the fact that he's overpowered, like you kind of are, you're rooting for him anyway, and so it's like, it's okay-ish, in my opinion. It's kind of like, that's why it's kind of neutral. It's like, I both liked it and disliked it at the same time, because I think it is done well in a lot of places, and then there are other times in which I'm like, oh my god, it's so obvious that you're doing this because he's the main character. And because I felt both ways, I put it as neutral. On the same vein, neutral is that a lot of people do not like Kavoth's character. I do. I quite like Kavoth. I think he's got a really compelling personality and a compelling backstory. But it's a character about Kavoth. It's a book about Kavoth and Kavoth's life, and told by Kavoth. So if you don't like him, you're going to hate this book. And I can't put it as a negative because I like him, but I can't put it as a positive, obviously, so it's a neutral. Another one is, like, it is kind of a slow-paced book. At times it feels very fast-paced, and once I got, like, into it, I was in it, right? Like, especially once he got to school, I was there. Like, I was sucked in, and I was interested, and I didn't want to put the book down, even though we had a lot of book left to go, and like, not like, it is slow paced even after that, but I was always like, what happens next at school? But it is quite slow paced. I would not say like it's a fast paced, action packed, like necessarily even plot driven book. It's way more character driven. So if you don't like character driven books, and if you don't like books that take a long time for like a plot to develop, you're not going to like this, because it's a book about a third of a man's life. Like, obviously you're spending a lot of time here, so it feels slow, and I think, in my opinion, feels incredibly slow paced before he gets to school, like that whole section of his life beforehand. So be warned, if you don't care for a slower book, this might be hard for you. Now on to my positives. Again, I really did like this book, which is why all of my like negatives and neutrals were tempered with like, but I liked it. Most of the negatives and neutrals, I feel like, are for other people who are going to read this book and may not have the same taste as me. Positives. I thought it was super engaging, like I said. Like, once we got to school, like, I was so invested in everything that happened, and I'm not exactly sure how Rothfuss did that when we weren't dealing with, like, at the time, like, the most life or death, like, grand cosmic issues, but things that just affected Kavoth. But I liked Kavoth so much by that point that I was genuinely engaged and cared about everything that happened to him. And so, to me, it was incredibly engaging. Part of that is that it has a super accessible writing style. It's not, like, dense and thick like a lot of fantasy tends to be. It's super easy, but also quite nice to read. It's not very Hemingway-ish, which I think can also be just as hard to read because it can be kind of dry. This hits that nice balance of it's definitely not purple prose, but enough description and that kind of thing to be not dry and boring, but not so much that it's difficult to know what's going on or it's easy to get lost in the description. He just hits the right balance. He's got a very accessible writing style. So if you're looking to get into fantasy, this could be, and you've had this would not be like an intro book in my opinion, but if you've had some experience with fantasy and you're looking for another one that's not like out there, hard to like inaccessible fantasy, this is good. I like this. It's easy to read and it's good for like casual fantasy fans, in my opinion. I also think the magic system is super interesting, like the sympathy and the naming. Like there's two, I think they're separate magic systems. It's not really clear yet, but I think that they're both fascinating. Sympathy is super scientific and hard, which I love. Obviously, I'm a Brandon Sanderson fan, so I really like sympathy. I don't know if naming is going to be hard or soft yet, because obviously Kavoth is telling the story, so what he knows, if he doesn't know how the magic system works, neither do we. So right now, naming is a soft magic system, but it feels rational all the same. It feels like Rothfuss knows how naming works. He has a strong grip of how naming works, that magic system works in the book. We as the reader do not, but both of them fascinate me and I want to know more. Because I think I've said in a million videos by now, I like both hard and soft magic systems. I think both can work. It just depends on the story you're writing and how the magic is used. So, big fan of the magic system. I think it's quite unique. I wish we had learned about it sooner in the book, but it's very unique, very interesting, and kind of like think galaxy brain, I guess. I don't know. And finally, I think Quoth's life story, I think in some ways is incredibly realistic, especially because he deals with a lot of money problems, and his money problems are a consistent underlying factor in this book, and they never just magically go away and disappear and suddenly money is not an issue, which I have not seen in a lot of fantasy books, is like this repetitive focus on poverty and struggling with money, which I so appreciated in this book because I feel like I have never seen it done before, and especially not seen it done this well. Like I've obviously read books from poor characters, but a lot of times that money problem is solved somewhere along the line, but here it's not. Like he struggles with money pretty much the whole book, and it's so realistic, and I really appreciate that about this book. And one of the things I loved most about Quoth's character was how he dealt with money problems. If it's not obvious enough by now, this was a 5-star book for me. I really liked it. I'm going to pick up Wise Man's Fear at some point. I'm a series hopper, in case you didn't know that. I don't tend to just start a series and then finish it or like catch up to it. I tend to start a series and then start another and then start another and then start 5 more and then go back to the series, which is a terrible idea for a lot of reasons, but that's probably what I'm going to do with Wise Man's Fear, especially because I've read a lot of bad reviews of it, and so I'm scared and sad that I'm not going to like it. So anyway, this was 5 stars. If you like fantasy, I would go read it. Okay, thanks. Bye. But both of them fascinate me and I want to know more. Because I think I've said in a million videos by now, I like both hard and soft magic systems. I think both can work. It just depends on the story you're writing and how the magic is used. So, big fan of the magic system. I think it's quite unique. I wish we had learned about it sooner in the book. But it's very unique, very interesting, and kind of like think galaxy brain, I guess. I don't know, quite good. And finally, I think Kavoth's life story, I think, in some ways is incredibly realistic. Especially because he deals with a lot of money problems, and his money problems are a consistent underlying factor in this book, and they never just magically go away and disappear and suddenly money is not an issue. Which I have not seen in a lot of fantasy books, is like this repetitive focus on poverty and struggling with money, which I so appreciated in this book, because I feel like I have never seen it done before, and especially not seen it done this well. Like, I've obviously read books from poor characters, but a lot of times that money problem is solved somewhere along the line, but here it's not. Like, he struggles with money pretty much the whole book, and it's so realistic, and I really appreciate that about this book. And one of the things I loved most about Kavoth's character was how he dealt with money problems. So, if it's not obvious enough by now, this was a 5-star book for me. I really liked it. I'm going to pick up Wise Man's Fear at some point. I'm a series hopper, in case you didn't know that. I don't tend to just start a series and then finish it, or like catch up to it. I tend to start a series and then start another and then start another and then start 5 more and then go back to the series, which is a terrible idea for a lot of reasons, but that's probably what I'm going to do with Wise Man's Fear, especially because I've read a lot of bad reviews of it, and so I'm scared and sad that I'm not going to like it. So anyway, this was 5 stars. If you like fantasy, I would go read it. Okay, thanks. Bye.